Welcome. You are listening to American Universe with your host, Nico Van Niekerk. Your dreams, lifestyle, and fortunes are in the crosshairs of a very powerful wrecking ball of liberty, and you will lose them if you do nothing. In this hour, Nico Van Niekerk will explain how to preserve our nation's liberties, your liberties. And now, the host of American Universe, Nico Van Niekerk.
Well. Another conservative talk show just hit the airwaves, folks. Good morning, all the good people in Southern California. This is American Universe with Nico Van Niekerk, your latest conservative jock on AM 870 The Answer. People ask me whether I believe there is room for another conservative talk show. I mean, there's Rush Limbaugh, Sean Hannity, Dennis Prager, and a host of other conservative talk shows out there. Why would another conservative talk show get any traction? Folks, until you hear what we are going to do with conservatives and liberals, the last word on conservative talk shows has not yet been spoken. I'm not worried about conservatives facing reality. They are used to functioning in the real world. It is our liberal friends that may have to re-examine their beliefs, getting a grip on the truth, if you know what I mean, which would be a good thing for them if they want to take my advice. When they have arrived, quote-unquote, we would welcome them with open arms into the fold of true Americans. Well, what a beautiful day it is today. Well, I know the show is pre-recorded, and I have no idea whether Sunday is going to be a nice day or not. But in Southern California, every day is a beautiful day, whether it's raining or the sun is shining. Now, what could be wrong with that? This is perhaps one of the few places in the world where a clap of thunder in the evening is news on television in the morning. Well, you may have wondered why this show is called The American Universe. Let me explain what that means, besides the obvious, of course. And I don't want to insult your intelligence, because this is perhaps one of the most informed and intelligent audiences in the country. Not because you have graduated from the School of Hard Knocks, or some other auspicious institution of higher learning, but because conservatives are naturally inquisitive individuals who do not easily get sucked into hype and irrational beliefs. The show is called American because it professes Americanism, which is in essence the inalienable right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, which is also called the American doctrine, and I'll be referring to that often in the show. It is called Universe because it includes all the people of the world who are Americans at heart. Millions, no, billions of Americans live outside this country who are yearning with all their heart to leave their countries of birth and come and live here. Not because we have food stamps or school food programs, but because the opportunities to elevate their living standards are here more abundantly than anywhere else in the world. They feel as if their countries do not appreciate them when they aspire to pursue excellence, but are prohibited by laws and culture from doing so. They would tackle any hardship, suffer any disruption to enjoy the opportunities that are right here in this country. But what are opportunities? Have you ever thought about that? Opportunities are not physical things. Opportunities are not stored in a repository somewhere, to which some have access and others do not. Opportunities are not created and distributed by government or big corporations. It is something that cannot be created. It is the ability of people to look at circumstances and recognize opportunities that are embedded within those circumstances, even adverse circumstances. That means the concept of opportunities is within people, within their own ability to imagine things that are possible. Two people living in the same household may look at the same set of circumstances. The one would see an abundance of opportunities. The other would see nothing. It is within the person to recognize and act upon the opportunities embedded within all circumstances. But it doesn't matter if people recognize and desire to pursue opportunities when outside forces prohibit them from doing so. Now, some of these outside forces are just other circumstances which need to be dealt with to modify and refine their opportunities. But when these outside forces are immovable obstacles created by government, it is tantamount to oppression of liberty and the pursuit of happiness. Do you see the wisdom of the founders in this? That they were able to define these aspirations accurately more than 200 years ago? There are many factors that dampen the pursuit of opportunities, and it would be unproductive to try and make a list of them in order to avoid them. But fortunately, they have a common characteristic. Can you guess what it is? They oppress the individual's liberty to pursue happiness. That's it. That's all. Those are the factors you may want to avoid and oppose like the plague. Take the very rich, for example. Now think about someone very wealthy, who became wealthy almost overnight, if you will. And there are many examples you can think of, I'm sure. And then ask yourself, what do you feel when you think about that rich person? Do you feel any animosity towards that person? Is your natural response that he was lucky or even crooked? If you do, you are oppressing your own individual liberty. Those thoughts are part of the problem. They kill opportunities. Having someone reach extreme wealth or success should rather demonstrate to you that there is no barrier between where you are and where that person is. Are there obstacles? Yes. Hardships to get there? Sure. But are there barriers which we cannot overcome? Nope, there's no such thing in a free country like the United States. At least there should not be any barriers in a free country like the United States, which is exactly the reason why this country is so popular as a life-changing destination to so many millions of people. Thinking about others' success in a positive light or seeing the opportunities that that person's success brought to you would allow you to recognize more opportunities that are within your own circumstances. In a way, these highly successful people show to us, regular guys, that there is no barrier between us and them. We can also get there where they are, if that's what we want. And if we do, then we should go for it. And if we don't, then don't let their success poison yours. If you're just tuning in, this is American Universe. Your host, Nico Van Niekerk, on AM 870, The Answer. Take, for example, Rush Limbaugh's bid for the Rams back in 2010, I think it was. Al Sharpton and Jesse Jackson attacked the bid, saying Rush Limbaugh's track record on race should exclude him from owning an NFL team. What utter nonsense! So these two gentlemen falsely erected a barrier beyond which an ordinary guy like you and I dare not aspire to go. And they used their local clout as revered terrorists to bully the deal into the ground. I thought it was a very sad day for opportunities and individual liberty, because it is irrelevant whether you like or hate Rush Limbaugh. It wasn't about him. It was about regular people's perception of what can be achieved that was destroyed. But then they are liberals, and liberals have an abysmal record on racism and terrorism and the economy. So there's no surprise there. I thought I'd just illustrate to you what type of person in our society would deliberately erect barriers to prohibit people from pursuing their opportunities, in essence oppressing them. These two gentlemen demonstrated quite clearly that they are not Americans at heart, and it is not hard to identify them in society. They are Americans who obtained their citizenship merely because they happen to have been born over here and not over there. It is Americanism that requires loyalty to the values that guarantee life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. One's geographical place of birth guarantees nothing of the sort. The fact that one is born to American parents holds only the expectation that the parents would educate their children to appreciate and protect these values. If the parents fail to perform their duty, they are also derelict in their duties as citizens, and they harvest the fruits and virtues of this nation as thieves and robbers. If they see no value in passing along the virtues of this nation to their children, do we really believe that they would sufficiently respect and revere this nation in times of need and rise up and protect her? History has taught us that most of them are quite happy to sit idly by, or even worse, sabotage this nation's values for their own comforts. It's time to feed the capitalist monster, folks. See you after the break. Don't go away.
And now, back to American Universe with Nico Van Niekerk on AM 870, The Answer.
Welcome back to American Universe on AM 870, The Answer. This is Nico Van Niekerk, your host, benevolently waterboarding you until you give up or give in, but you won't leave disappointed. Visit us on www.americanuniverse.net, not .com, .net, where you can get into the battle tank of liberty and engage those powers that have raided our economy and caused us so much hardship. We should not have to suffer this onslaught one moment longer. Let them suffer for their beliefs. We already live in the promised land. What nonsense is this? I know there are people who just mark time in life and live in a society where there's safety and a lack of want. Which is fine, folks. It's none of my business what other people want. Then there are others who would let no stone unturned to exercise the opportunities they see. This country gladly accommodates both types of people. You want to just tick along with the flow? That's fine. Go ahead. You want to be a live wire that attracts lightning wherever you go? Hey, that's fine too. It is a climate that exists here in the United States only. We cry out against those regulations that limit or oppress people's inalienable right to pursue their happiness, which is their ability to engage the opportunities of their choice. Various systems of government in the world seek to level the playing field to a common acceptable level, whatever that means, which means some would have to be restrained by force while others have to be lifted up beyond their earning ability, robbing them of the opportunity to learn to refine their efforts, to reach their goals in life, putting them in shackles as wards of the state. Because the pursuit of happiness is a profoundly personal choice, government, or anyone else for that matter, is wholly incapable of leveling the playing field or giving somebody a fair shot. Government not only has no right to give anybody a fair shot, it doesn't have the ability to deliver on that promise. And any effort to attempt that injures those on both ends of that spectrum. Those who pursue opportunities are punished to force them to be more mediocre. You know, you should just not be all that smart. And those who are quite happy to live simple lives are robbed of the opportunity to learn to adapt to a changing environment. It is in government's DNA to ensure that it remains in power in perpetuity, which it can only do if it controls as much of people's lives as it can to prevent them from becoming self-sufficient, because that disconnects the levers of control. If government determines what one needs, government also determines how much of it you may have. There is no one who is capable of prohibiting government from using that power to reward those who agree with it and punish those who don't. That is why the Founding Fathers created the founding principles the way they did, listing the things government cannot do and being silent on what the people are allowed to do, making the people sovereign, not the government. If you're just tuning in, this is American Universe. Your host, Nico Van Niekerk, on AM 870, The Answer. To control people necessarily means limiting their liberties. And limiting their liberties means limiting their pursuit of happiness, which is an assault on this nation's values. To control people requires acts of violence against them from the government, oftentimes disguised as benevolent acts of charity. This violence comes in many forms. In some cases, it is physical violence of dictators and despots. In others, it's exorbitant taxes and regulations, and oftentimes it is both. Left to its own devices, government would always progress towards total anarchy and subservience. It is wholly incapable of remaining neutral or reversing subservience back to liberty. The people alone have that power and the responsibility to throw the yokes of despots off their backs, provided they act in a timely manner through the ballot box and the courts. The people fail to act at the very first attempt at violating their liberties. The pain and effort to reverse those violations increase exponentially. It doesn't matter what form the violence of government against the people takes. It has at its root one ancient ancestor: tribalism. Now you may ask, Nico, are you nuts? Tribes exist in Afghanistan and Africa, not in the United States. Wait, folks, it's not that simple. In a tribal system of government, everything belongs to the chief: life, liberty, and property. The tribal members do not own anything. They are allowed very limited liberties and rights which the chief alone dispenses. No one else. In return, the one primary duty and obligation of the tribe is absolute loyalty to the chief, to see that the chief is not disrespected and that he remains in power. Oh, for the well-being of the tribe, of course. Tribal members who are quite content to live in the tribe are happy. They're happy to be there because of the comfort and the safety that a lack of want and accountability brings. They are naturally tribes people. Rush Limbaugh refers to them as low-information voters, but I mildly disagree that that is an accurate description of them. It is true that they are low-information people, but not pointing to the underlying cause thereof may just lead us in the wrong direction, which we cannot afford. They do not want to know about things like success, responsibility, or accountability. All they want in life is to be able to coast through life with the least amount of worry and doubt. Other things do not matter. But desiring to be free from accountability and a lack of want are personal choices, which means they cannot be defined and applied to a whole nation. For instance, at what point does a desire for a lack of want become freeloading? At the point where one cannot sustain one's desired lifestyle by one's own efforts. That is when that point is reached. What no society can afford are freeloaders, people who want others to provide for them while they just wade through life without any pang of their conscience about it. Let's take an example from nature. Do you know why there are signs in our national parks that prohibit people from feeding the wild animals? Because the animals quickly learn that humans are much easier and more abundant sources of food. So why would they stalk and chase prey if they can just hang around the campsites and the food is thrown at them? Tribespeople do the same thing. As long as they can sponge on government for all their needs, they will quickly descend to the lowest possible level of existence. The only barrier that might have been able to protect them from falling right through the economy was that natural ability to compete, lose, relearn, and compete again, now better equipped to compete better. But the self-esteem crowd taught us that losing in sport and failing in school were more damaging to our kids than becoming educated in the school of hard knocks, which is called life. They became life ignorant. And without that crucial piece of education, tribespeople, quite comfortably, descend right through the self-respect barriers without a care in the world, threatening that their cash flow from the rich better not dry up. We are guilty of not having thrown these preachers of evil right out of our country at the time. By listening to our elected officials today, it is easy to recognize those who still sing in that choir. They ought to be thrown out of office and shamed into hiding. If you're just tuning in, this is American Universe. Your host, Nico van Niekerk, on AM 870, The Answer. Even though tribespeople consider the chief as their savior, as their only hope, their only comfort, eagerly and willingly waiting upon the chief for their daily bread, they should not be shielded from themselves. The chief is an adversary of the concept of self-responsibility. So he will be eager to confiscate more and more from others to subsidize his tribe's people, ensuring his sovereignty. Although one may need help when feast is followed by famine, there must always be a clear path to return to self-respect and sustainability by one's own hand. The desire over lack of one should come alive through one's own efforts, which it cannot if resources are poured out on them regardless of any effort on their part. It is the people's duty to make sure lawmakers who violate the citizens' basic human right to be self-sufficient are thrown out of office. In a culture of individual liberty like the United States, there is ample room and safety for tribespeople, provided they are not being exploited to become servants of the tribal chief, because that assaults the Constitution and the very fiber of our nation. There is also ample room in the United States for those who wish to pursue opportunities, because successfully engaged opportunities result in more abundant opportunities for all, even the tribespeople. There is no reason that those people with a tribal mentality and those with a live wire mentality cannot live together in harmony within the context of individual liberty. This country is a perfect environment for both groups to survive. Unfortunately, for the past 80 years, liberals slowly and piece by piece introduced a tribal system of government into the United States, slowly making people believe that they are unable to fend for themselves, encouraging them to fall below their own levels of self-respect, trusting in the chief alone for their daily bread. This has now fully reared its ugly head. With a second segment in the can, folks, we're up at a hard break. Stay with us. Don't go away.
And now, back to American Universe with Nico Van Niekerk on AM 870, The Answer.
Welcome back to the American Universe with your host, Nico Van Niekerk, here on AM 870, The Answer, driving ruthlessly forward in the battle tank of liberty, on the sidewalks, through parking lots, through your homes, and through the lives of liberals. I wish you can see the many aggravated looks I get when I say that we ought to thank the Lord for President Obama and that he has been elected for a second term. But it's worthy of thanksgiving, because he ripped the covers off of the liberal plan to replace the republic with a tribal system of government with him as chief. Considering their battle plan, however, I think he pulled the trigger on that strategy too soon. Just think about that for a moment. Another 8 years of a mild Democrat or a mild Republican would have Judas goated us beyond the point of no return. There, you see, I've just invented another verb. Judas goated. And you know what a Judas goat is? It is a goat that leads sheep out of the holding pen into the slaughterhouse, and just as they enter the point of no return, the Judas goat jumps over the fence, runs back to lead the next herd into the slaughterhouse. That's his job. No, let's give thanks to God that Obama came at this moment in time, and not 8 years later. It is now clear what the Democrats and those liberals who have infiltrated the Republican Party have been up to for the past 80 years. It is also clear that it is their battle plan to punish opportunity seekers and patronize the tribespeople who have then no choice but to ensure the chief's sovereignty. Opportunity seekers are smacked down and kept under lock and key, or should I say regulation and law, if you know what I mean, because the last thing the chief can afford is that his authority is challenged, which it is when some members of the tribe obtain wealth and power that the chief do not have or did not give them. So more stringent constraints, such as regulation and taxes, are placed upon the live wires to prevent them from engaging their opportunities. While it is obvious that creating and preserving a culture of individual liberty would actually protect the tribe from breaking up and lift all boats by the rising tide of success, it nevertheless threatens the chief's sovereignty, reducing the tribe's dependence on the chief and his purpose of being there. So after all, it's not about the tribe. It is not about the people. It is not about the country. It is all about the chief. Does that sound familiar? Do you still think tribalism doesn't exist and is not propagated in the United States? Ask yourself, what was the underlying system of government in the European monarchies of the Middle Ages? Tribalism. What was the underlying system of government in the Roman Catholic Church when in the Middle Ages they burned and tortured to death dissidents of their brand of Christianity? Tribalism. Now, don't get me wrong, folks. I'm not criticizing the Roman Catholics. It's none of my business what people believe. I'm just pointing to the underlying characteristics that coincide with the tribal system of government. Oh, and to history, of course. Both the Roman Catholic Church and most of the remaining monarchies had their tribal governments curtailed, first by revolution, followed by democracy. Here in the United States, the Roman Catholic Church is constrained by the U.S. Constitution from re-engaging a tribal system of government as it pertains to its civil office in society. In its spiritual office, however, the Roman Catholic Church is still governed by their ancient tribal system, where obedience to the under-chiefs and ultimately the uber-chief, the Pope, is not negotiable. That's perfectly fine with me. I don't mind. In fact, it's none of my business, as long as their spiritual office does not interfere with their civil office. Because if that happens, the practice of the spiritual office reaches into the realm of the civil office, interfering with other people's constitutional and natural rights. It is very important that we understand this distinction between civil and spiritual offices. We'll cover this in more detail in upcoming shows because this understanding lies at the root of religious tolerance and understanding the separation of church and state in this country. If you're just tuning in, this is American Universe. Your host, Nico Van Niekerk, on AM 870, The Answer. The desire to pursue one's opportunities is a natural law of economy, just as there is a natural law of gravity. They exist in spite of any human cause or intervention. And those who recognize and obey these laws have the least amount of drag in their pursuit of happiness, especially gravity, you will admit. The live wires can also not remain subdued for long before finding a way to pursue their opportunities, just like one can overcome gravity only for a while. But it is inevitable that gravity will prevail in the end, just as those who pursue opportunities will, at length, prevail. The mere question whether ordinary citizens have a need, quote-unquote, to possess or do something is already a red flag, because that question has in its very DNA the marks of a tribal chief trying to wean you off your liberties. It is nobody's business, especially not government's, what you and I need in life. Period. No exceptions. We have right here, in our time, a perfect example of how liberty prevailed under years of tyranny and communism. We may add that capitalism, which is the essence of liberty, prevails regardless of the level of tyranny to which it is exposed. It will find the smallest crevice in which to hide and remain alive, but it can never be extinguished. And what is this real example? This real-time example? Zimbabwe. Robert Mugabe is the classic Marxist communist who ran that country into the ground until customers had to cart billion-dollar bills in a wheelbarrow to buy a loaf of bread. Because they couldn't count the money any longer. They had to weigh it. And you know what? Capitalism survived that too, in spite of all the tyranny. The lesson to be learned is that once Zimbabwe stopped printing money and adopted the US dollar as standard currency, the economy immediately started flourishing. Or should I say that the flicker of capitalism that remained aflame during all that tyranny flared up at the first application of capitalism. Everybody prospered, almost immediately, and the economy started growing again. But the damage done to the economy and the population will take generations to repair. Well, we have another break ahead of us, which leads us into the final segment, folks. Stay with us. Don't go away.
And now, back to American Universe with Nico Van Niekerk on AM 870, The Answer.
My, how time flies. We are already in the final segment of our precious time together. Welcome back to the American Universe with your host, Nico Van Niekerk, here on AM 870, The Answer. To be good, responsible citizens, we should always be on the lookout, like sentinels, and recognize factors that encroach on our liberties, and eliminate or remove them, or remove those people from power who preach that we should compromise our liberties, and success will inevitably follow. That's a Nico law of economics, just so you know. Earlier in the show I spoke about true Americans and opportunities, and I'd like to expound that concept a little bit more. As things are now, unless people leave their countries and immigrate into the U.S., the perfect climate for the pursuit of their opportunities will forever be lost to them. That is why millions of people suffer unimaginable sacrifices and hardships to come here. It is because these virtues are currently practiced nowhere else, only in this geographical space. Since it is impractical to expect all who believe in Americanism to come here, we have an obligation to export these virtues to the rest of the world, so that all those who are Americans at heart may harvest the fruits of liberty and prosperity right there where they live, in their countries of birth. To understand who Americans at heart are, or let's call them by their real name, true Americans, one should not look at where they live, but what their beliefs and conduct are. True Americans currently living in the U.S. are much closer to true Americans living in other parts of the world, and who are citizens of other countries than United States citizens living right here who have no regard for this nation's values. We need all the people from all the countries who are of that belief and conviction to join us, so that we can be an effective force for those who wish to be free from tyranny anywhere in the world. We would like to proclaim these virtues and values to all our brothers and sisters in Americanism, so that they can begin to effect change in their countries, which will allow them the liberties that will make them free and prosperous, just as we are free, just as if they had immigrated here. If you're just tuning in, this is American Universe, your host, Nico Van Niekerk, on AM 870, The Answer. And now for the really big question. Where do we start? Well, you may have guessed that I would say we should start at the beginning. Not many people realize that they are really conservatives in their beliefs and conduct. But because of the insufficient manner in which conservatism has been defined up to now, our adversaries were given all the opportunities in the world to demonize and mischaracterize the term completely, causing many to recoil from being identified as conservatives. Even if you feel you are not really a conservative, I invite you to stay tuned and listen to this show for the next couple of weeks, and then check your beliefs again. You might be pleasantly surprised to learn that being a conservative in the correct context is honorable, compassionate, and dignified. People that I spoke to have admitted that they, might be a little conservative, with a push here and a pull there, under some circumstances, considering this, considering that, but just not admitting to the label. So the key lies in the manner in which conservatism is defined. Up to now, I dare say, even the giants of conservatism have not been able to define it accurately. And when I say accurately, I'm not saying they were wrong, but that nobody has ever defined it in such a manner that it was shielded from redefinition by our adversaries, who turned it into a pejorative with which they have beaten us into a pulp for generations. This onslaught on our most precious values must cease now. Well, I've developed the correct and efficient definition of conservatism, or what a conservative is, so that it remains pure and protected against corruption. It also resolves many riddles in our society, such as the myth of some being to the left and others to the right of the political spectrum. It's not about me, folks. Don't get me wrong. I am standing on the shoulders of giants who went before me. But if I can succeed to convey to you the truth about who we are and how we can remain true to that conviction, fully acknowledging the efforts and works of those that have gone before, I would be perfectly happy that I've achieved my objectives. Nothing is about one person. This is bigger than all of us. This is about this nation. No, it's even more than that. It's about all the nations of the world. Now, I can hear you say, that's ridiculous, Nico. Well, just think about it for a moment. Through which other country would world dominance be possible? Think about any country on the planet today and imagine that it falls into the hands of an emperor or a ruthless dictator. Would it change many other countries? I doubt that. The United States in its present state would probably rush to the side of the oppressed and smack down the assault on democracy, restoring the freedom of millions of people, as it has demonstrated throughout history. But if all the military might, financial prowess, natural and human resources of the United States fall into the hands of a ruthless dictator, who would come to the rescue? There is nobody. If we fail to protect the founding virtues of this nation and the fine, honorable traditions and exceptionalism that it had demonstrated over the past 2 centuries, the world is indeed in peril of the greatest tyranny it has ever seen. And please don't say that it'll never happen, folks. It has happened too many times in history where great nations fell because of the internal rot that immorality brings. Individual liberty demands that we do not corrupt the morals of others. Individual liberty demands that we do not dilute our morals for anyone or to obey any law. We are to vote into office only those who defend and protect this nation from immorality by fiercely defending each one's individual liberty. If that's your belief, then prove it and join us to turn back the assault on those bastions that have protected our liberty up to now. If we expect to reverse this onslaught, once the ballot box and the courts have been totally rendered impotent to fulfill its role as the third branch of government, once the courts have joined the mobs, reversing this onslaught will not come at a cheap price. That's the end of our show this week. Board the battle tank of liberty again next Sunday at 11 a.m. right here on AM 870 The Answer. There is so much still to do and so little time. See you, folks.
You've been listening to American Universe with your host, Nico Van Niekerk, on AM 870 The Answer. Tune in again next week, Sunday at 11 a.m. for more thought-provoking questions and insight from Nico Van Niekerk here on American Universe.